Here is your story with micro changes. I've kept the exact same start and end, opening hook to the final motivational close plus call to action, maintained the same emotional tone, dramatic, inspirational, heartfelt, focusing on courage, friendship, and character, preserved the overall length/structure, detailed narrative flow, key scenes, dialogue beats, and reflective ending, but made subtle adjustments. Minor rephrasing for smoother flow, slight word tweaks for natural rhythm, small clarifications, and tiny variations in sentence structure without altering meaning or adding or removing major elements. March 23, 1960, in the VIP lounge of the Sands Hotel Casino in Las Vegas, a wealthy casino owner used a racial slur against Sammy Davis Jr. that made the entire room go silent. But what Elvis Presley did in the next 60 seconds didn't just shock everyone in that room, it revealed something about his character that most people never knew existed. Las Vegas in 1960 was a strange paradox. On the surface, it was the entertainment capital of the world, where the biggest stars performed to sold-out crowds every night. The Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop were at the absolute peak of their powers, filling the Sands Hotel showroom night after night with their mix of music, comedy, and effortless cool. But beneath the glamour and glitz, Las Vegas remained a deeply segregated city. Black performers could entertain white audiences, but they couldn't stay in the hotels where they performed. They couldn't eat in the restaurants. They couldn't even use the front entrance. Sammy Davis Jr., one of the most talented entertainers alive, a man who could sing, dance, act, and do impressions better than almost anyone, still had to enter the Sands through the kitchen. Elvis Presley had been in Vegas doing a series of shows at the New Frontier Hotel. His movie career was soaring, but he still loved live performing, thriving on the energy of a live crowd. That night, he'd finished his show early and been invited to the Sands to catch the Rat Pack's performance and perhaps hang out afterward. The Rat Pack show had been electric. Frank was in rare form, Dean was hilarious as ever, and Sammy had brought the house down with his impressions and vocals. After the show, a select group was invited to the VIP lounge, a private backstage spot where the stars could unwind, sip drinks, and relax away from the public eye. Elvis was seated on a couch, sipping a Coca-Cola and chatting with Dean Martin about upcoming film projects. Sammy was across the room, still in his tuxedo, buzzing from the performance, laughing and joking with other performers. Frank was holding court in the center, spinning stories that had everyone in stitches. The VIP lounge was invitation only, but money and power could open doors that talent sometimes couldn't. One of the people who walked in that night was Harold Beckman, owner of 3 major casinos in Vegas. Beckman was in his 50s, overweight, with slicked-back hair and an expensive suit that couldn't mask his crude nature. He was the type who believed his wealth gave him license to say or do anything. Beckman strode in like he owned the place, which, in a way, he partly did, since he held a stake in the Sands and wielded the kind of influence that could make or break careers in Las Vegas. He greeted Frank with over-the-top familiarity, slapped Dean on the back, and then his gaze settled on Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy was mid-story, hands gesturing animately, his infectious energy lighting up those around him. Beckman approached, drink in hand, and cut in. "Hey, Sammy," he said loudly enough for the room to hear. "Great show tonight. You people sure know how to entertain." The way he emphasized "you people" turned a few heads. Sammy, always the pro, smiled and nodded. "Thanks, Mr. Beckman. Glad you enjoyed it." Beckman took a slow sip and then dropped the line that froze the room. "Yeah, you put on a good show, but you know what? At the end of the day, you're still just another N-word in a tuxedo." The room went dead silent. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Laughter vanished. Everyone looked from Beckman to Sammy, trying to absorb what they'd just heard. Sammy's face shifted instantly. The smile vanished. His eyes widened, not in rage, but in raw shock and hurt. For a man who'd faced racism his whole life, from vaudeville days through endless slurs and barriers, you'd think he'd built some defense. But that kind of hate never stops stinging. It slices fresh every time. Sammy stood frozen. His mouth opened as if to respond, but nothing came. He was stunned, unable to process being hit with that word here, among friends and peers. Frank Sinatra from across the room began moving towards Beckman, his expression darkening with fury. Dean Martin set his drink down, his laid-back vibe replaced by tension. The whole lounge waited to see what came next. But before Frank could close the distance, before anyone else reacted, Elvis rose. He'd been sitting quietly off to the side. The instant those words landed, something shifted in him. He placed his Coca-Cola down deliberately, as if any sudden move might shatter it, and crossed the room with quiet determination that made people instinctively step aside. Elvis placed himself between Beckman and Sammy, not aggressively, but protectively. He wasn't especially tall, but in that instant, he filled the space. "Mr. Beckman," Elvis said, his voice low yet carrying perfectly through the hush. His southern drawl thickened with emotion. "Mr. Beckman, I'm going to need you to repeat what you just said, because I don't think I heard you right." Beckman, fueled by liquor and ego, smirked. "You heard me, Elvis. I said he's just another—" Elvis raised a hand, cutting him off. "No," he said, still calm but sharp as shattered glass. "I'm stopping you there. What you're about to repeat will decide if you leave this room walking or carried." The threat hung, subtle but clear. Beckman laughed uneasily, glancing for backup.
"Come on, Elvis. I'm just messing around. Sammy knows I'm kidding, right, Sammy?"
Sammy hadn't budged, still reeling. Elvis stepped closer. "Let me tell you something, Mr. Beckman, and I want every person here to hear it. Sammy Davis, Jr. is more of a man than you'll ever be. He's got more talent in his little finger than you've got in your whole body, more class, more dignity, more courage than a coward like you could ever grasp." The lounge stayed utterly quiet. Frank watched with arms folded, a faint smile forming. Dean nodded. Everyone else was stunned. No one spoke to Harold Beckman that way. He controlled too much of Vegas. But Elvis pressed on. "You know the real difference between you and Sammy?" Elvis continued, voice gaining strength. "Sammy earned everything he has, every ovation, every dollar, every ounce of respect. He earned it by being better than the rest, by working harder than the rest, by having to be twice as good just to get half the treatment. What have you earned, Mr. Beckman? You inherited cash from your daddy and bought your way into power, but you can't buy what Sammy has. You can't buy talent, you can't buy dignity, and you damn sure can't buy the right to disrespect him in front of his friends." Beckman's face flushed, embarrassment mixed with rage. "Now wait a minute, Elvis. You don't know who you're talking to. I can make one call and—" "And what?" Elvis cut in. "Blacklist me? Make sure I never work Vegas again? Go ahead. I'd rather never step foot here than share air with a man who thinks money lets him treat people as less than human." Elvis turned, locking eyes with everyone present. "And that goes for all of you. If you're fine with what this man said, if you think that's okay, then you're no friend of mine. But if you're as sickened as I am, if you believe no one should ever be spoken to that way, then show it right now." For a beat, no one stirred. Then Frank Sinatra stepped forward, standing beside Elvis, facing Beckman. "Get out," Frank said flatly. "You're not welcome here." Dean Martin joined them. "You heard him. Get out." One by one, others moved to stand with Elvis and the Rat Pack, a quiet but unbreakable wall of solidarity. In seconds, Harold Beckman stood isolated, staring at a united front that had just declared he no longer belonged. Beckman scanned the room, his bravado cracking.
"You're all making a mistake," he muttered, voice thin. "I own this town. You work for people like me." "No," Elvis replied softly. "We work for the audiences who pay to see us, for the fans who love the music and the shows, for our families and ourselves. We don't work for bullies and bigots. Now get out before we make you." Beckman lingered another second, perhaps weighing if his influence could fix this, but facing those stares, he realized it couldn't. He turned and headed for the door, trying to hold his head high, though his hands trembled. Just before exiting, Elvis called out once more. "Mr. Beckman?" Beckman paused. Elvis continued. "Every time you see my name on a marquee, hear my songs on the radio, or watch Sammy get a standing ovation, remember this night. Remember when you revealed exactly who you are to everyone here. And remember, you have to live with that forever. We don't." Beckman left without replying. The door shut. Silence held for a long moment. Then Elvis turned to Sammy, who still stood motionless, processing it all. Tears glistened in Sammy's eyes, but a smile broke through, a mix of pain, gratitude, and awe. Elvis approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You okay, brother?" That word, brother, spoken with real warmth, cracked Sammy open. He pulled Elvis into a tight hug. The two men embraced while the room watched in quiet respect. When they separated, Sammy wiped his eyes and looked at Elvis in wonder. "You," he said, voice thick, "you really are the king, not for the music or movies, but for what you just did. No one's ever stood up for me like that." Elvis shook his head. "Sammy, you're my friend. You're my brother. Brothers protect each other. That's all it was."
Frank Sinatra walked over, arms around both. "That," he said, "was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Elvis, you just showed real class." The atmosphere warmed, tension dissolved into solidarity, a sense that something meaningful had occurred, a line drawn, sides chosen right. Music came back on, drinks flowed, talk resumed, though eyes kept drifting to Elvis and Sammy, still side by side, speaking softly. About an hour later, someone suggested heading to the showroom. Official shows were done, but why not an impromptu jam for themselves? And so, at 2:30 a.m. on March 24, 1960, roughly 50 people saw one of the greatest unrecorded performances ever. Elvis and Sammy took the Sands stage, singing gospel tunes, classics, chatting between numbers about music, friendship, and what it meant to entertain. Sammy shared what Elvis had done upstairs. Applause thundered for over a minute. Elvis, shy about the praise, tried joking it off, but Sammy insisted. "This deserves it," he said. "Let him hear it." When it wrapped around 4 a.m., Sammy caught Elvis before he left. He slipped a simple gold ring from his finger, worn for years. "I want you to have this," Sammy said. "It's not fancy, but it means a lot to me. Wear it, and remember you've got a brother who'll never forget tonight." Elvis tried declining, but Sammy pressed. So Elvis accepted, slid it on, and wore it for years. Those close to him said whenever asked about it, he'd share the story, always highlighting Sammy's talent and character, never his own role. The incident in the Sands VIP lounge stayed mostly private for years. Those present shared it quietly among themselves. It wasn't newspaper material in 1960, when racism was seldom discussed openly, especially involving powerful casino figures and stars. But in entertainment circles, it became legend, told to show who Elvis truly was off stage. Other performers who heard it said it shifted how they viewed using fame to stand against wrong. Frank Sinatra, with his own complex record on civil rights, later reflected that watching Elvis taught him something vital. "Elvis didn't make a political speech or wave a flag," Frank said in an interview years on. "He just saw a friend hurt and stood up. Sometimes that's stronger than any protest. Sometimes the boldest act is treating people as human beings and refusing less from anyone." The bond between Elvis and Sammy endured through their lives. They stayed close, boosted each other's work, and spoke of one another with deep respect and warmth. Sammy later said Elvis helped him see that real friendship transcends barriers, that ties built on mutual respect and shared values outlast society's divisions. As for Harold Beckman, his sway in Vegas faded in the years after. Whether from whispers of that night spreading or industry shifts, his grip loosened. He sold his casino stakes in the late 1960s and left Vegas. He passed in 1978, largely forgotten. The story of Elvis and Sammy that night reminds us courage isn't always loud or public. Sometimes it's spotting wrong up close and refusing silence, even if it risks something. Elvis knew confronting Beckman might bring fallout. The man had real pull and could complicate things in Vegas. But Elvis also knew some values outweigh careers or connections. Human dignity, friendship, the basic truth that no one deserves dehumanizing words because of race. What makes this story hit hard is that Elvis acted without seeking spotlight or praise. He did it because it was right, because Sammy was his friend, his brother. You don't let anyone harm your brother. He did it because his upbringing taught him all are equal in God's sight, and treating someone otherwise was a wrong he couldn't ignore. In the decades since, as America wrestles its history of racism and ongoing fights for equality, the tale of Elvis and Sammy gains fresh meaning. It shows progress comes not only through laws and marches, vital as they are, but through personal acts of bravery, people choosing to not tolerate hate in their space. The ring Sammy gave Elvis was among his belongings after his passing. It was something he kept near, clearly special. When Lisa Marie asked about it later, Priscilla shared the story, ensuring the next generation knew who Elvis truly was, not just the star, but the man. Today, discussions of Elvis Presley's legacy center on his music, shows, and cultural impact. All deserve celebration. But perhaps the truest glimpses of the man come from moments away from stages or spotlights. Maybe the real measure lies in a VIP lounge at 2 a.m., standing between a friend and a bully, refusing to let hate prevail. If this incredible story of courage, friendship, and standing up for what's right moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of using your voice to defend others. Have you ever witnessed someone stand up against injustice? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more untold stories about the moments that reveal true character.